Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our weekly lecture series. Say this is a great player of the past, Daniel Noteboom, although the lecture is not about him, but I felt bad for him, so I want to pretend the lecture is about him, even though it's not. The lecture is about the Noteboom variation named after Daniel Noteboom. And there's no Wikipedia article on the Noteboom variation, but they discuss it within the Daniel Noteboom chess player Wikipedia, so I did that. And I want to thank our sponsor, Jeremy from Alabama, as he wants to be known. If you'd like to sponsor a lecture, contact Karen. Her details are on the screen now, if you're watching on YouTube. And, well, I feel bad because Daniel Noteboom had such a tragic story. He learned chess at the age of 12, and he was a Dutch player. And when he was 15, he was admitted to the London Chess Society, even though it was for adults only with high standing. But they made an exception for him, and he won the club championship 3 times. 1930, he played in the Chess Olympiad, and he scored 11.5 out of 15, which is remarkable, including a win against Salo Floor, who was another great player of the past. And I guess we could call this the great opening of the past, because opening was invented in the mid to late 1920s, and it's named after Daniel Noteboom, who unfortunately, after playing in Hastings in 1931 to 32, tournaments over New Year's, went back to London, and he died soon thereafter of pneumonia the same month. And he was only 21 years old. So I feel bad having a lecture on an opening named after a player who passed away so young and could have had a great chess career and probably would have been one of the best players in the world if he had gotten older. But instead he was, a local celebrity in London and in the Netherlands. And even though he died at the age of 21, he still has this opening named after him, which you can see here on Wikipedia. Some people call it the Abrahams variation, named after Gerald Abrahams, who popularized the Noteboom variation. Unfortunately, I could only find 2 games that were published where Noteboom played the Noteboom. It's not easy to play it. White has to play along. But I found several that Abrahams played and many others strong grandmasters. Okay, so first I'm going to tell you what the Noteboom is, and then I'm going to tell you I don't know what the Noteboom is, because you could argue that this is the starting position of the Noteboom, and then somebody else would say, no, it's not. You have to go deeper. So I'm going to give you Wikipedia's opinion. So whoever wrote the article, they better be right. Black makes this triangle pawn structure that you see on the board here. And you could argue this is the Noteboom, but I wouldn't do that, because if Black doesn't take on c4 and plays knight f6, the Semi Slav, or the f5, the Stonewall Dutch, that's not a Noteboom. So I wouldn't call this the Noteboom. Also, it's unclear to me whether you would call this the Noteboom. This is a very complicated pawn sacrifice that comes from this variation. White usually plays bishop e2, but knight e2 is also possible. That's actually called the Marshall Gambit. It's one of Marshall's gambits, not the famous one in the Ruy Lopez. Okay, so I'm going to stick with Wikipedia and say that this is the start of the Noteboom, this position. And all of our games went the same way, because they all do. Now, I want to show you a little trap, because I'm going to show you a game later that I lost. So I want to show you how I beat some people first, so you don't think I'm the worst player in the world. There's a trap I've been playing for 40 years, and I've had a couple people fall into it on the stream, and I've had a couple people fall into it in U.S. chess, rated chess. Both of them were over 1900. One was 2000, one was 1900. The move is bishop f4. And the thing is, if black pretends it's a Noteboom and plays the following moves, which is what black plays in a Noteboom, in this position, normally the knight's on f3 and the bishop is on c1. You're going to see that in the games that I show you. However, in the variation I play with bishop f4, this is actually losing for black because you play queen f3, and you can't play queen f3 if the knight's on f3, but you can here. And my opponents see queen f3. They're not bothered by it. They play queen d5 because the knight's pinned. Then I play queen g3, then they're bothered because I'm threatening to take on g7, take the rook, and I'm threatening the knight on b8, which is defended by my queen. So now white's winning. And in one of my tournament games, my opponent saved their knight and let me take their rook. Another tournament game, the guy saved his rook and I took his knight. And I won both games. And in the stream, I've won the games where I've had this position. And technically, that's not a Noteboom because I played bishop f4 instead of knight f3. So the first game we're going to look at is a game with black player Dmitry Tiomkin and white is Garry Kasparov. And this was the highest rated game I could find. Tiomkin was only 2,300 FIDE. Now he's a grandmaster. And this was played in a Tel Aviv simultaneous exhibition, even though Tiomkin plays for Canada. So he took on c4, and they played the standard moves that you play in the Noteboom. And with the bishop on f4, the knight on g1, then this is bad for black. And a lot of people play that because they just think it's the same thing. So all of our games are going to start from a position like this because this is the main line. Bishop d2, white wants to take the pawn on b5, but white can't take the pawn on b5 with the knight because the knight's pinned. So the computer won't let me because my knight's pinned. So people unpin their knight. Now they want to take the pawn on b5. Black plays a5, and after takes, obviously if black takes back, white takes with the knight. So black, instead of taking on b5, takes the knight on c3, and then plays takes. And in this position, white always plays b3, because if black takes on b3, white wins the b5 pawn with check, white wins the b3 pawn. Material's equal, but black's development is not good. There's good and there's not good. That's not good. And white also has the two bishops. White has two pawns in the center. So that's terrible for black. Another mistake black can make is b4. Man, that looks great. Bishop goes back, c3. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is the rook isn't defended on a8. So white can play bishop takes b4, and you can't take the bishop because I take your rook. I mean, you could. But... Okay, so in this position, everybody plays bishop b7. Now, white has two moves that grandmasters play, d5 and taking on c4. And I have a story about d5, which you're going to hear at the end of the lecture. Most people, and by most I mean 90%, take on c4. Now black can play b4 because black's rook is defended, so I can't take the pawn anymore. So I play bishop b2. And I would consider this the start of the Noteboom. And you could also argue that this is the start of the Noteboom, because if white plays d5, I would still call this a Noteboom. So, okay. So in the Kasparov game, with Tiomkin, Kasparov has white. Kasparov played knight f3. Now, the problem with having an opening repertoire that you play is you can't always play it. And you can prepare every opening that's ever existed, and somehow in the first 3 or 4 moves, your opponent can play a move that's never been played before, and you're not going to have your opening. So if you play the Noteboom every game, you're not going to face it when you play e4, because Noteboom's a d4 opening. You're not going to face it when white plays the London, because white doesn't play c4 in the London. And you're not going to face it if white plays the Kali or the Trompowsky or the Torre attack or any other opening white can play where white's not playing knight c3 and knight f3. The most common move here that's not knight f3 is e3. And this isn't a Noteboom. This is just a Semi Slav, unless black plays f5, then it's a Dutch. Stonewall Dutch. Okay, so the Noteboom starts with black making the triangle offense with these 3 pawns here. And if white plays knight f3, and you get this position with black by playing those 3 pawns the way they're played. Now if you take on c4, that's the opening variation that this lecture is on, and it's named after Daniel Noteboom, who we talked about earlier. And as a consequence of Noteboom being a Dutch player, I found some Dutch players later on in chess history played the Noteboom a lot, including Jan Smeets. Jan Smeets was one of the 10 best players in the Netherlands for about 15 years. I haven't seen him play lately, so I don't know if he's retired or he's teaching chess. I don't know what he's doing. But Smeets was on the Dutch Olympic team a couple times, and he actually beat me when we played in the UAE, which is the only time I've played in the UAE, and I played Jan Smeets, one of the best players in the Netherlands. Okay, and so let's flip actually, what we'll do is we'll keep the person who wins at the bottom. And the person who sponsored the lecture, Jeremy, he didn't say, I want to look at the Noteboom from white's perspective or from black's perspective, but I assume that if you ask about the Noteboom and black is playing the Noteboom, then you want to look at it from black's perspective. So I didn't want to have all black wins and make it look like this opening wins by force for black, but I wanted to have more black wins than white wins because the person asked to look at the Noteboom. So, okay, but this game Kasparov won, so we'll look at from white's point of view. Okay, so they played the main line, which we're going to see often in this lecture. Takes, b3, takes, bishop b2. Okay, typically black plays knight f6 here. Okay, and typically white plays bishop d3. Okay, so this is the main line. Here, I've seen black play bishop e4, knight e4, castle, and knight bd7. Okay, this guy played knight bd7. I think that's the most common. Kasparov castled. You have to remember, this is a simultaneous exhibition, and black is rated over 2,300 FIDE. But Kasparov was 2,800 FIDE, so. Okay, and then black played queen c7, which I think is an excellent move. Kasparov played knight d2, and Kasparov's idea is to build a bigger center. And by moving the knight out of the way, the f pawn can move, the e pawn can move because we're controlling e4. Castles, and Kasparov played f4, and black played a4. So the Noteboom is too exciting. So I'm trying to figure out why white can't take on a4, and then I figured it out. If white takes on a4, black plays queen c6, threatening checkmate with advantage, and black is threatening the rook on a4. So that kind of double attack would win. And if white doesn't take on a4, those pawns look pretty good. Okay, so a4 makes sense. Kasparov played e4. That looks pretty good. So it's a battle of ideas. White gets the big center. Sometimes white gets a kingside attack. And black gets to try to make two queens on the queen side. Okay, a3. Now the pawn's actually attacked, because queen c6 doesn't threaten mate anymore. Bishop c1. Rook d8. e5. Kasparov pushes in the center. Knight goes to e8, which I guess black has to play. Knight b3, helping to blockade the pawns. g6, trying to stop white's attack on the king side. Queen to d2, attacking the pawn on b4. And possibly preparing the queen to go over to the king side with like f5, queen h6. Bishop c6. Now, I must admit, I don't understand bishop c6 because Kasparov attacked the b pawn, and then black ignored it. Now, looking at the position, I don't see a way for black to defend the pawn. You can't play queen a5 because the knight's here. So the most obvious move, and the only move that I see, is queen b6. But after c5, the queen is pushed off the b pawn. I'm going to take the b pawn. So I guess this means that black's play of a4, a3 was premature. His b pawn's weak. And because his bishop's on c7, on b7, he can't play rook b8, either rook, and defend his pawn. So black was a little loosey-goosey with his pawns. Now Kasparov's going to take one of them. So bishop c6, Kasparov takes on b4, rook b8, queen c3, and it looks like Kasparov just snatched a pawn. Bishop takes g2. Black has a trick he wants to play queen b7 and attack the knight. Another way to do this is queen b7, but I guess white could play knight a5 here. I don't think black has enough compensation for an exchange. I don't see how black does anything on the king side. Seems like with the rook on f2, and the rook and the two knights don't help attack. So he played the other way. He took on g2 first, then he checked, then he took the knight. So black got his pawn back, but white has the big center and the two bishops. And the a3 pawn is more of a weakness than a strength. Kasparov traded queens and played bishop to e4. And that attacks the rook and attacks the other rook. And most importantly, it attacks the a pawn, which can't be saved. There's nothing black can do to save his a pawn now, because he has to move one of his rooks. He either has to play rook here or rook takes rook. And then if he plays rook takes rook, this rook's attacked and this pawn is hanging. Plays rook b8, I can trade rooks and play rook takes a3. So this position's hopeless. Two bishops against two knights, big center, and I'm going to take the a3 pawn in the next couple of moves. So in this position, black resigned. If black wasn't playing Kasparov, maybe he would have played on, but down a pawn and an ending with white's big center, past c pawn, two bishops, and the knights are just no good. That looks just completely hopeless. So Kasparov won that game pretty quickly, but that's because typically in the Noteboom, if somebody's a much better player, they're going to win pretty easily because the position gets super complicated early. So if you have the black pieces and you want to get a complicated game, the Noteboom's a really good opening. Okay, now we'll see black doing better. We'll flip the board. This is a game between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Arjun Aragasi. And this was before Tata Steel, when Arjun was winning all of his games. This was a blitz tournament played in 2023 on chess.com. So now you can see from Black's point of view, you see the triangle offense there. Takes, e3, b5, a4, bishop b4, bishop d2, a5, takes, 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 and b3, and then bishop b7. And they played the same way as the Kasparov game. And this is still the Kasparov game. Aragasi castled. In the Kasparov game, Black played knight bd7 and then castled, so they could transpose. Castles. He played queen c7 instead of knight b to d7, which is fine. So in a similar position, Kasparov played knight d2 here. Not the same position, because their Black's knight was on d7. Jan played queen e2. This is another common idea. White wants to play e4. White connects the rooks. And then a4, because Jan moved his queen off of d1, letting Black play a4. So queen e2 probably not the best line for White. Seems like what Kasparov did worked out pretty well. Okay, d5. White opens up the diagonal, trying to punish Black for not playing knight bd7 earlier. Mess those kingside pawns up. Knight bd7. Then knight d4. White could also try e4. Knight on d4 threatens the e6 pawn. E takes d5. Rook c1. And that's sort of an admission that White doesn't have enough compensation for a pawn. White has some nice pieces that are aimed towards the Black king, but Black has good defense of his king, and Black is ready to promote these pawns. a3, bishop a1. That's why he played rook c1, so his bishop would be able to blockade and stay on the diagonal. Queen b6, getting off of the line with the rook. Rook b1, and White's on the defensive here, and White's down a pawn. So this isn't good for White. Takes, takes, bishop a6 with a skewer. White wins one of the queenside pawns. Black wins the exchange. And this pawn, unlike the pawn in the Kasparov game, which was going to be captured, is not going to be captured. So rook b8, try to trade the rooks off. a2, threatening rook b1 check. King e2, rook b1 anyway. And Jan resigned because if he takes the knight and loses his bishop, that pawn's going to promote. It's going to win at least a knight, maybe more. And if White moves the bishop away, Black has a lot of winning moves, like knight e4, for example, must be the most winning. And this pawn's going to promote, and White's going to be down a rook. White's already down the exchange, so an exchange plus a piece equals a rook. That's chess math for you. So after rook b1, Arjun won, Jan resigned. You can see what a complicated opening that is. In a blitz game, Jan couldn't make it to move 30. Even though they played like 13 moves of theory, he was lost like 6 moves later. So sometimes those pawns promote, and sometimes White gets a big center and crushes Black, as you can see from the first 2 games. Okay, the next game is a game played by the gentleman who the opening is named after. This was played in the Olympiad in Hamburg in 1930. This is the aforementioned Olympiad where Noteboom got 11.5 out of 15. He has Black in the Noteboom. This might not be the best game ever played because it was played in 1930, but it gives you a flavor of the opening. And it's the only game I could find in the database where Noteboom actually won with his opening. Okay, so everything's the same. All the moves are the same. They transpose. Nowadays, people usually play a5 first, but it transposes to play bishop b7. And then he played a5. So they got the same position. And white played bishop d2, which is already a mistake. But this game was played in 1930. This was one of the first few games ever played in the Noteboom. So they didn't have any theory to look at or know any other games. So bishop d2 looks okay. It keeps an eye on the pawns. But the bishop is much more active on the diagonal. Knight f6. Knight e5. White's leaving his king in the center and not developing his king side. Queen a4. These moves don't make a lot of sense for white. Castles. And this position's already probably losing because if white moves the bishop, then g2 is hanging. And if white doesn't move the bishop, the king's going to sit here on e1. And white doesn't want to castle queenside. There's no defense for the king over there. So knight c6. Two bishops versus two knights. e5 opening up the center. And if white plays d5, black can play knight e4, threatening to take. And this knight can go to c5. White queen is almost trapped. So white played bishop e2, trying to castle. Rook e8. Now if white castles, we take on d4. And we win material because the pawn is pinned. Black still has the two connected past queenside pawns. So white played bishop f3, trying to win the exchange here. Rook c8. E takes d4. Black gives away this pawn so he can get an attack against white's king. Boy, if I was white, I would want to trade queens. So I definitely would have taken with the queen. I don't want the queens on the board with my king on e1. So I don't like rook takes a5. Knight c5, attacking the queen, and also knight d3 check. Knight b3, attacking the rook and taking the bishop. Both moves would win. Rook a2, that's what I would play. Rook b8. Knight d4. The knight keeps hopping around, bothering white. b3. Queen a5. And all of white's pieces are pinned. And there's a nice tactic here. If white castles, black takes all of white's pieces. Now, if you're taking notes this lecture, if you can take all of your opponent's pieces, then do that. First we take this piece. Then we take this piece, because always sack the exchange. That bishop was defending the rook. And then white said, where'd my pieces go? And black wins with the passed pawn also. So white can't castle, and all of white's pieces are pinned. I still can't draw an arrow, but it doesn't stop the pieces from being pinned. Bishop d5, activating the bishop. Knight c2 check, the rook is pinned. Queen c3. Now we got three pieces attacking your bishop. And in Noteboom fashion, black still has a passed pawn on the 6th rank on the queen side. That's what black's hoping for. Black just also has a mating attack. Black has many ways to win. I'm sure knight takes e3 wins right away. But this also wins. Yeah, white's king is just stuck here. That's a pretty sad white king. And white's going to get mated and lose his queen. Probably both. Probably the engine would announce mate and a human would just take the queen. And there's no tricks. There's no back rank mate because the queen is defending that. So white's king never got safe that game. and black had that passed pawn on the 6th rank until the end. So that was a fitting game for Daniel Noteboom, who the opening is named after. And the last game I want to show you is, I was thinking when I was preparing the lecture, I said to myself, who plays the Noteboom? Like, who plays it a lot, so they'll have a lot of experience. And when I was in my 30s and 40s, maybe my 20s too. I'm going to say in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, but probably only 40, 41. There's an American IM who should have been a GM. My ears are burning. And his name is Dmitry Schneider. And he quit chess, I think, to get a regular job about 15 years ago. But he played in U.S. championships. He played on the open circuit. He played a lot of open tournaments. His USCF rating was very high. And I personally have a very bad score against him. And I was thinking, we got to find a Dmitry Schneider game because he was the American player who played the Noteboom all the time. And then I found one. It was Ben Finegold, Dmitry Schneider from the U.S. Championship. It says 2004. So this game was played over 20 years ago. And I had a brain fart during this game. It was the U.S. Championship, so you knew the night before who you were paired with, and I would prepare for the game. And I prepared for this game like 2 hours maybe, and I know he plays the Noteboom, so we raced to this position. And in this position, I prepared to play the move d5, which is rare, instead of the usual b takes c4. When we got this position, I instantly played b takes c4, forgetting that I had prepared d5 for 90 minutes. I looked at d5. I had all kinds of analysis. I had novelties on move 20, and then I forgot to play d5. Now, d5 isn't a better move, but this ruined my taste for the game because I hadn't prepared this at all, and this is all that he plays. So we got one of these Noteboom positions, which he has a lot of experience in, and I've never had as white. I've never had it since either. I've never played the main line of the Noteboom. Okay, so I did sort of by accident here. Bishop d3, knight d7, castles, castles. And in the Kasparov game, which was played before this game, Kasparov played knight d2, and this is where Jan Nepomniachtchi played queen e2. I played rook e1. I wanted to play e4, but I didn't want my queen to give away the a4 square, so he could play a4. He played rook e8. Looks like he wants to play e5 at some point, but he can't do it. I haven't defended too much. I played c5, which I don't think is a very good move, but sometimes my bishop can go to b5. Sometimes I'll play e4. So maybe c5 is okay. He played bishop c6. I played e4. And he played h6. And when I found this game in the database, there was I think a Russian player who analyzed the game, annotated the game, and he wrote h6 novelty. So I guess this has all been played before our game. And I collapsed very quickly, not knowing the ins and outs of the opening. Now, the point of bishop c6 is black wants to play a4. So I have to be quick in the center and do things very aggressively. I played bishop c2. I was worried about a4, so I tried to play defensively, which didn't work. He played queen c7, which is a good move. I played queen d3, and my idea was I'll play e5, he'll move his knight, and then I'll put my queen on h7. Although I am giving away the a4 square, so he might get two queens, but maybe I'll mate him first. he played rook fb8, and he said, you can put your queen down there, I don't care, but not really. So I played the move d5, panicking. If I play e5, he has a move that I missed when I played queen d3. And that's why he played rook fb8. He was looking ahead. Now he can play bishop b5, which obviously he can't play if his rook is on f8, because his bishop would be hanging. Now it's defended. And I can't keep my queen on the diagonal. My queen has to move off the diagonal somewhere. Then his knight goes to d5. Then he's going to play a4 and just crush me. My center pawns are completely blocked. And his queenside pawns are not blocked. And his knight's defending. His rooks are defending his pawns. His bishop and rook are defending a4. And he's just going to smush me. So when I played queen d3, I didn't see rook e to b8, which makes e5 not a good move. If I can't play e5, which was the whole point of queen d3, then what can I do? Black's play is a4, and then push all his pawns and get two queens. What's my play? Well, e5 doesn't work, so I try d5. I gotta try something. And basically that just loses a pawn. He took the pawn, now he's a pawn ahead. I played bishop b5. I'm not sure why he can't take on d5. I'm guessing he can. I think bishop b5 is better because d5 hangs my d pawn. I see what I can. No, I can't do that. But my c pawn is also hanging. He decided to take that one. I'm not sure what I would do against bishop to d5, why I played d5. He didn't take on d5, so we must have both been geniuses back then. I was a better player 20 years ago, it's true. Although I don't know what I would have done. But he played bishop b5, attacking my queen. And more importantly, when I save my queen, he takes my c pawn, and I'm down a pawn, and he has the two passed pawns. So now I still don't have any attack. It looks good. Bishop's here. Bishop and queen is here. But his h6 really worked out because I can't play knight g5 and get more attack on his king. I played knight d4. He played a4, getting his two queens. Rook c1. Queen went to d6, blockading my pawn and getting off of this file. Queen h3, I want to play knight f5 or knife f5. b3, bishop f5, a3. Man, the truth hurts. I don't really have any compensation for his two connected passed pawns. Knight takes b5. He took back. Bishop takes pawn, just losing a piece. He takes. Bishop takes. Knight takes. Rook c6, and he plays b2. b2 is a very funny move. It's not the only winning move, but it not only threatens to queen, it threatens my queen. Also, I'm threatening his queen. The problem with all these queen threats, him threatening to promote to a queen, my queen attacked, his queen attacked, is I'm down a piece. So I'm down a piece, and he's got two queen threats. So I played queen f5, taking away his escape square. Maybe I can play rook here and attack his king somehow. But he just took my rook because his knight goes to f8. I don't have any attack. And I resigned here because if I take, he takes my queen. Then if I take, plays rook here. And I'm too late to play rook e8 check and queen because he queens would checkmate. Although I guess if he made a rook, that would be funnier to have three rooks. Or he could play rook here mate. It's not mate, but, you know, after rook e1, it's mate. I know the guys on YouTube were like, that's not mate. And if he doesn't want to mate me, he could take my queen and then he could decide how to win, promoting to a queen or a rook or rook a1. So after queen takes rook, if I play rook e8 check, just plays knight f8. And again, I'm down a rook and a knight, and he's threatening to mate me on the back rank. He's threatening my pawn. He's threatening my rook. And I'm down a lot of pieces. So after queen takes rook on c6, I resigned. And I was really mad at myself, not for playing a bad game, but for forgetting my prep, which I normally don't do. I don't prep a line, and then I just play another line. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I prepped another line. So that happens sometimes when I used to prepare a lot, and I was a better player, and I had a lot of preparation. Sometimes you forget your prep, but that was just me moving too quickly in the opening and not thinking about what my prep was. Now, I still played the main line, and the game was still interesting, but you can see everything that black wanted to do, push the queenside pawns, stop my center pawns, he was able to do with his greater knowledge and understanding of the Noteboom, just like the great Daniel Noteboom, who popularized the opening, but didn't have a lot of time in life to get some good games in and popularize it even more. Anyway, I hope you like that variation. I want to go back just to show you the main line again and the different transpositions. I like looking at games I lost over and over again. Okay, so this is the starting position of the Noteboom. I played a4. You can play e3 also. And he played a5, which is the preferred move order. Bishop b7. Here, white can play d5 or take on c4. Some grandmasters play d5. You can look up those games on a database if you have one. But taking and getting this position is the most common. And in this position, I guess if I'm ever playing in a blitz game and I have it again, I'll play like Kasparov and play knight d2 and f4 and e4 and try to do good like Kasparov did, not like everybody else who's got crushed by these great pawns. Anyway, I want to thank Jeremy from Alabama for sponsoring the Noteboom lecture. If you'd like to sponsor a lecture, contact my wife Karen. Her information's on the screen. And I'll see you guys next time with more weekly lectures. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. It helps out the channel tremendously. Thanks for watching, everybody. Goodbye.